Hudson Taylor, God's Adventurer, Chapter 14. I'm not taking y'all back to 4, I promise. Destination, Inland China. Hudson walked along a broad street in the West End near Regent's Park, and climbing the wide steps of one of the large houses, rang the bell. The door was opened almost immediately by a manservant, and feeling a bit shy, Hudson entered a beautifully furnished hall, very different in appearance to the narrow passage that welcomed his visitors at home. "Her ladyship is expecting you," he was informed, as he handed the butler his hat and stick. Then he was shown into the room where he was to take breakfast with the Dowager Lady Radstock. It was less than a week since the launching of the China Inland Mission, and Hudson was scarcely prepared for the direction and things were moving. He was not accustomed to these circles of high society, but his hostess, whom he had met for the first time at church the day before, put him entirely at his ease. She wanted to hear about China, and as he told of those millions in the inland provinces and how God was urging him to go to them, not only she but several others at the breakfast table were interested. In a surprisingly short time, he was receiving invitations to attend luncheon parties with titled people and to speak at drawing-room meetings where all the guests appeared in evening dress. As the weeks sped by, he found himself carried along as though by a full tide, traveling not only in England, but in Scotland and Ireland too, to meet people who had heard about his enterprise and to speak at meetings large and small. At one of those meetings, he met a bright and witty young man who was later to become the founder of the well-known Dr. Barnado's Homes. At that time, Tom Barnado was only 20 and a member of the theological class to which Hudson had been invited to speak. Not being very big himself, when Tom Barnado saw how short and slight the missionary from China appeared beside the tall, well-built figure of the class leader, he whispered to his neighbor, "Good, there's a chance for me." For he wanted to go to China, and approached Hudson about joining the inland mission. Following Hudson's advice, he took medical training at the London hospital. There he discovered that his vocation was to rescue waifs and strays in England. Barnado was not the only young person stirred into action on hearing of the needs of the Chinese people west of the mountains, north of the lake, south of the clouds. Hudson had prayed for 24 skillful, willing workers on that memorable Sunday morning on the Brighton beach, and God was answering that prayer. The days were never long enough for Hudson now. Traveling, speaking at meetings, interviewing people who wanted to join the mission, writing booklets about China, he went from one task to another with never a stop, it seemed. There were 7 or 8 missionaries already in China, including Meadows, who were eager to join the mission that was to go to the inland provinces. As 1866 dawned, it became evident that his 24 workers had already been given, for 16 young men and women were prepared to sail with him and Maria to China as soon as arrangements could be made. The arrangements that needed to be made, of course, all seemed to require money. Hudson figured that it would cost nearly £2,000 to get him and his party to China, and by the first week in February he had only £170 in hand. They hoped to sail in May. It did not appear very likely that they would in the circumstances. Somehow Hudson felt sure that God was going to send them all that was required. He and Maria decided that they would hold a prayer meeting in their house every day at 12 o'clock to ask God to do so and to pray for his direction and help in all connected with their going to China. Once more, Hudson proved how very practical it is to pray. Within 5 weeks of starting that daily prayer meeting, all the money they needed had come in. One man alone had given £650. All that remained was to find a sailing ship on which the whole party of 18 adults and 4 children could be accommodated. That was not so easy, it seemed. April passed into May, and still no suitable sailing ship was bound for China was procurable. Nevertheless, Hudson and his party were still hoping to sail in May. On May 2nd, Hudson was in Hertfordshire, standing in the home of Colonel Puget, who had invited him to speak at a meeting about his work. It was what is known as a good meeting. The audience listened earnestly and quietly. That proverbial pin might have been heard to drop. Colonel Puget, the chairman, felt it was too good an opportunity to let pass. Hudson always stipulated that there should be no collection taken up at any of his meetings, but Colonel Puget felt this meeting should be an exception. Why, the people were obviously deeply moved. Undoubtedly, they would give generously if the plate were passed around. He was a little put out when Hudson restrained him as he was about to announce that there would be a collection. "You made a great mistake, if I may say so," he said at supper. "The people were really interested. We might have had a good collection." Although he did not say so, he himself had intended putting 5 pounds in the plate. This enthusiastic young missionary leader was too impractical. His ideal of only asking God for money was splendid, but to refuse to allow a collection at a meeting where people were obviously eager to give was carrying things too far. Colonel Puget retired to bed shaking his head with such thoughts. Strangely, he could not sleep. As he lay in bed, turning from one side to the other, his thoughts went back to the meeting. Hudson had spoken about the Chinese who were dying without once having heard of the only one who could save them. Every hour 1,000 of them die, going out into the darkness of an eternity without Christ. Every hour 1,000, every hour 1,000. The thought of it seemed to burn into the very heart of the good colonel. All thought of the wasted opportunity of taking up a large collection was gone, as he seemed to see the broad stream of Chinese going steadily, hopelessly into the darkness. Something must be done to let them hear about a Savior. Something was being done, of course. That gallant little band of laborers. Only young men and women, most of them, prepared to sacrifice their lives if need be, to follow young Hudson Taylor right into the heart of that great Eastern Empire. "But what can I do?" thought the elderly colonel, and his thought became a prayer. "Lord," he prayed earnestly, "what wilt thou have me to do?" He remembered the 5-pound note he had intended to put in the plate as a donation, and somehow it seemed pathetically small. In the darkness, the colonel prayed again, "Lord, what wilt thou have me to do?" After a long time he fell asleep, but not before he knew what he must do. The following morning, before the colonel came down to breakfast, the postman had delivered a letter to Hudson from a firm of shipping agents. A ship called the Lammermuir was about to sail for China, and Hudson was offered the entire cabin accommodation for his party. It sounded perfect, but what would the price be beyond their reach? The colonel appeared, explaining that he had had a bad night and apologized for being late. They sat down to breakfast. When it was over, the colonel asked Hudson into his study. "I have some money here for you," he said, handing him several contributions that had been given to him to pass on to Hudson. Then he continued, "I felt yesterday evening that you were wrong about the collection, but now I see things differently. Lying awake in the night, I thought of the stream of souls in China, 1,000 every hour going out into the dark. I could only cry, 'Lord, what wilt thou have me to do?' I think I have his answer." And he handed Hudson a check. "If there had been a collection, I would have given a 5-pound note," he added. "This check is the result of no small part of the night spent in prayer." Hudson looked in wonderment at the slip of paper in his hand. The check was made out for not 5 pounds, but 500 pounds. There was no question now as to whether he could afford to book the entire accommodation of the Lammermuir. The unexpected check, coming right on the heels of the notification of the sailing vessel, seemed to be God's assurance that it was a boat on which he and his party should travel. So less than a month later, they set sail for China, the first of a steady stream of men and women that for more than 80 years poured into the great cities and numberless villages of the regions of the west of the mountains, south of the clouds, north of the lake, to tell men like Mr. Need and Wang the basket maker and the farmer Ozzie about Jesus. Hudson leaned on the railing of the ship, looking out to the sea. It was not a year since he had made that entry in his Bible, prayed for 24 willing, skillful laborers at Brighton, June 25th, 1865. How quickly things had happened since that day. It seemed as though God had just been waiting for him to take that one step, and when he took it, he found everything else was prepared. The first time he sailed for China, a lonely young man of 20, he had only vaguely realized the purpose for which he had been sent. "Go for me to China," the voice had said, and he had obeyed. This time, as a man of 33, he understood more clearly the task that had been set him. He was to lead his little team of workers into the heart of China to spread throughout the length and breadth of that great empire the news of God's love to man. Difficulties and dangers, hardships and heartaches all lay before him. There was nothing comfortable or easy about the task ahead. This campaign would demand every ounce of his strength and endurance. Nevertheless, he was not afraid. All that was required of him, after all, was loyal obedience to his master and unswerving trust in him. Christ was the leader, not he, and with such a leader he was prepared to follow to the end. Hudson leaned on the rails of the Lemmermuir with an eager, happy heart as she plowed her way through the waters towards his life work. I heard the call, "Come follow," that was all. Earth's joy grew dim, my soul went after him. I rose and followed, that was all. Will you not follow if you hear him call?